Las Vegas has long been treated as a symbol of American confidence, a city built on entertainment, risk, and the assumption that people will always have money to spend. For decades, its success was seen as proof that the American consumer was resilient, optimistic, and willing to indulge. But something has changed, not suddenly and not dramatically, but steadily and quietly. Visitor patterns are shifting, spending behavior feels different. The energy that once defined the city no longer comes automatically. What is happening in Las Vegas is not just about tourism, it is about how Americans now relate to money, risk, and everyday life. This is not a story about one city failing. It is a story about pressure building across households, about rising costs reshaping behavior, and about a consumer economy reaching its limits. Las Vegas is not the cause of this change. It is the place where the change becomes impossible to ignore. To understand what is happening in Vegas is to understand something deeper about America itself. For the past 2 years, Americans have been fed a reassuring narrative. Headlines, tourism boards, airlines, and hotel chains repeat the same message over and over again. Travel is back, the pandemic is over, people are spending again, airports look crowded, flights are full, and hotel prices are higher than ever. On the surface, it appears that the American travel industry has not only recovered, but rebounded stronger than before. But this image collapses the moment you look beyond the surface. Because crowded airports do not automatically mean healthy tourism. High prices do not automatically signal strong demand. And full flights do not mean that the average American is traveling the way they used to. What we are seeing is not a broad-based travel recovery. What we are seeing is a distorted version of it. The post-pandemic travel boom does exist, but it exists for a very specific group of people. Luxury travel is thriving, high-end resorts are fully booked, premium cabins are selling out, upscale destinations continue to report strong revenues. This is not an accident. It reflects the reality that the top 10% of earners in America emerged from the pandemic financially stronger than before, with more disposable income and more flexibility to spend. Meanwhile, mass tourism in America is quietly breaking down. Middle-class travel has not disappeared overnight, but it has been shrinking slowly and consistently. Families are traveling less often, trips are shorter, destinations are chosen more carefully, and places that feel financially punishing are being removed from consideration entirely. Las Vegas exposes this reality more clearly than almost any other city in America. For decades, Vegas positioned itself as a mass market playground. It was built on volume, not exclusivity. It was designed for middle-class Americans who wanted an escape that felt exciting but still affordable. Vegas did not rely on elite travelers. It relied on millions of ordinary people showing up consistently. Today, that foundation is cracking. Data from airports, hotel occupancy trends, and visitor behavior shows a clear pattern. People are still traveling, but they are avoiding destinations that feel like financial traps. Vegas is increasingly perceived as one of them. Rising room rates, mandatory resort fees, paid parking, and stacked taxes have transformed what used to feel like a manageable getaway into a high-risk expense. This shift has nothing to do with laziness, burnout, or a lack of interest in travel. Americans still want to get away. They still crave experiences, but they are far more sensitive to how their money is treated. In an era where groceries, rent, insurance, and utilities are all rising at the same time, travel is no longer just about desire, it is about calculation. The post-pandemic travel boom, as it is commonly described, hides this truth. It blurs the line between who is traveling and who is not. It celebrates revenue growth without asking where that revenue is coming from, and it ignores the reality that for millions of Americans, travel has quietly shifted from a reward into a financial risk. Vegas does not disprove the travel boom narrative by collapsing overnight. It challenges it by revealing its limits. The problem is not that Americans stopped traveling. The problem is that travel itself has changed. And for a growing portion of the population, it no longer feels like freedom. It feels like a liability. When people talk about falling travel numbers, the assumption is often simple. Americans are canceling trips. They are staying home. They are no longer interested in traveling the way they used to. But this assumption misses what is actually happening inside American households. The reality is more subtle and far more uncomfortable. Most Americans are not quitting travel altogether. They are quietly downgrading their lives. This downgrade does not come with announcements or dramatic lifestyle changes. It happens through small, private decisions. One fewer trip per year, a shorter stay, a destination that feels safer for the budget. Over time, these choices add up to a completely different travel landscape. This shift begins inside the household budget. Grocery bills are higher than they were just a few years ago. Rent and mortgage payments take a larger share of monthly income. Insurance premiums rise without warning. Utilities cost more, and everyday expenses feel less predictable. In this environment, travel becomes one of the few flexible categories left to adjust. And when people adjust, they do not eliminate travel first. They downgrade it. Las Vegas has become a clear symbol of this change. Not because people suddenly dislike the city, but because Vegas now represents financial exposure. The base price of a hotel room is no longer the real price. Mandatory resort fees inflate the bill. Paid parking adds another layer of cost. Taxes stack on top of already inflated rates. What once felt straightforward now feels deliberately complicated. For middle-class Americans, this complexity matters. It creates anxiety before the trip even begins. People start calculating worst-case scenarios instead of looking forward to the experience. A weekend getaway turns into a spreadsheet problem. The question is no longer, can we afford the room? It becomes, what will this actually cost us when everything is added in? As household expenses rise, Vegas slowly disappears from the mental shortlist of reasonable destinations, not because it is unaffordable in absolute terms, but because it feels irrational compared to alternatives. When groceries and insurance already demand more attention, no one wants a vacation that feels designed to extract money at every step. This is why the idea that Americans are simply canceling trips misses the point. The demand for travel still exists. The desire to escape, to rest, to experience something different has not gone away. What has changed is the tolerance for financial pressure. People are protecting themselves by choosing options that feel predictable, transparent, and emotionally safer for their budgets. Vegas, once known for offering excitement without financial punishment, now sits on the opposite side of that calculation. The city is not being rejected emotionally, it is being deprioritized economically. And in an era of rising living costs, that distinction makes all the difference. The problem with Las Vegas is often reduced to one word: expensive. But cost alone is not what pushes people away. Many American cities are expensive, yet they continue to attract people, investment, and attention. The real issue with Vegas is not just how much it costs, but what people receive in return. In cities like New York, high costs are justified through opportunity. People tolerate expensive rent because there are jobs. They accept high prices because there is access to networks, industries, and long-term economic mobility. Even when the cost of living is painful, there is a sense that the city offers something productive in exchange. Las Vegas does not operate under that logic. Its economy is built almost entirely on consumption. Money flows in for entertainment, gambling, and short-term pleasure, then flows straight back out. There is no expectation of growth, connection, or future return. The transaction ends the moment the trip ends. For decades, this model worked because the cost of entry was low. Vegas did not need to offer long-term utility. It only needed to offer affordability and excitement. People accepted the one-way nature of the spending because the financial damage was limited. Losing a weekend's budget did not threaten the rest of the year. That balance no longer exists. As prices rise, Vegas has crossed into a dangerous category. It is now a high-cost city without economic utility. Visitors are asked to spend more while receiving nothing that extends beyond the trip itself. There are no professional connections to build, no career advantages to gain, and no long-term value to justify the expense. This creates a psychological break. A vacation that once felt harmless now feels irresponsible. A few days of entertainment can translate into months of financial regret. The return on investment is emotional at best and increasingly unstable. In an era where every dollar is being measured against groceries, rent, and insurance, this kind of spending becomes harder to defend. During a cost of living crisis, Americans become highly selective. Cities that offer opportunity survive. Cities that offer productivity survive. But cities that demand high spending without providing economic function begin to lose relevance. Vegas is not failing because it lacks excitement. It is failing because it no longer fits the logic of modern American decision-making. As costs continue to rise, utility becomes the dividing line, and Vegas, by design, stands on the wrong side of it. When Americans complain about the cost of travel, the frustration is often misunderstood. It is not simply about high prices. People are willing to pay more when they believe the price is honest. What angers travelers is not expense alone, but the feeling of being systematically misled. A hotel room advertised at $174 creates a clear psychological expectation. That number sets the emotional boundary of the purchase. But by the time resort fees are added, parking is charged, service fees appear, and taxes are stacked on top, the final bill no longer resembles the original promise. The price did not rise gradually, it revealed itself late. This gap between expectation and reality is where trust breaks. Americans do not experience this as a normal price increase, they experience it as deception. The transaction feels engineered to hide the true cost until the commitment has already been made. That sense of manipulation stays longer than the memory of the trip itself. Las Vegas has normalized this structure. Resort fees are framed as unavoidable. Paid parking is justified as operational necessity. Service charges are presented as standard practice. Each individual fee is defensible on its own, but together, they form a system that erodes confidence. Visitors no longer feel like customers, they feel like targets. This matters deeply in American consumer culture. Trust is not a soft value, it is an economic one. When people trust a brand or a destination, they return. When they feel cheated, they do not protest loudly, they simply disappear. They choose somewhere else next time, quietly and permanently. The damage caused by hidden fees extends beyond the immediate transaction. It reshapes behavior. Travelers become defensive, they research excessively, they assume the worst, and eventually they stop engaging altogether. The destination becomes mentally categorized as unsafe for the wallet. In a period of rising living costs, Americans have less patience for uncertainty. Every dollar carries weight. When a vacation feels like a trap instead of an escape, loyalty collapses. Vegas is not losing visitors because it is expensive. It is losing them because it no longer feels fair. And in the American economy, once trust is broken, it is rarely repaired. Las Vegas was never built for the wealthy. Despite its image of luxury and excess, the city's real foundation was always middle America. It was designed for workers, union families, and ordinary households looking for an affordable escape. Vegas thrived not because people spent extravagantly, but because millions of people showed up consistently. The success of the city depended on volume. Middle-class tourists filled hotel rooms, restaurants, shows, and casinos year-round. Their spending was modest but reliable. This created a dense economic ecosystem where jobs were stable, services were staffed, and the city felt alive beyond the casino floor. When the middle class begins to disappear, the damage is not immediately visible on balance sheets. Casinos can still report strong profits. High rollers can replace thousands of smaller bettors. Luxury guests can generate impressive revenue per visitor. On paper, the system appears healthy. But cities do not survive on margins alone. They survive on participation. The middle class provides foot traffic, cultural energy, and economic continuity. When that group leaves, the city does not collapse suddenly. It empties slowly. Restaurants lose regular customers. Shows close quietly. Workers face reduced hours and unstable income. Entire neighborhoods begin to feel hollow. Vegas today reflects this imbalance. Financially, parts of the city look stronger than ever. Socially, it feels thinner. The ecosystem that once supported a wide range of workers and visitors has narrowed. What remains is profitable, but fragile. This is why the loss of the middle-class tourist is fatal in the long term. Luxury travel can sustain profits, but it cannot sustain a city. Volume creates resilience. Margin creates vulnerability. When economic pressure forces middle America out of the equation, Vegas becomes rich in revenue and poor in structure. The industry rarely acknowledges this openly. It focuses on earnings, not erosion. But beneath the financial reports lies a simple truth. A city built for the middle class can't survive without them. The decline in Canadian visitors to Las Vegas is often treated as a minor footnote, a currency issue, a seasonal fluctuation, a temporary shift in travel patterns. But this interpretation underestimates what Canadian travelers represent and why their absence matters. Canadian tourists have always functioned as an early indicator for Vegas. Historically, they are price-sensitive, highly rational, and emotionally detached from the mythology of the city. Canadians do not come to Vegas because of nostalgia or cultural identity. They come because the value makes sense. When it stops making sense, they leave without hesitation. This makes their behavior unusually informative. Canadian travelers calculate total cost carefully. They pay attention to exchange rates, fees, and hidden charges. They compare destinations pragmatically. When Vegas begins to lose this group, it signals that the city has crossed a financial threshold where perceived value no longer justifies the expense. Unlike American tourists, Canadians do not rationalize losses through emotional attachment. They do not view Vegas as a rite of passage or a symbolic escape. Their decision-making is colder and more transactional. That is precisely why their retreat matters. It removes sentiment from the equation and leaves cost as the dominant factor. When Canadians pull back, it does not mean Vegas has become unattractive. It means Vegas has become inefficient, and inefficiency is the first condition that drives away rational consumers. This pattern carries a larger warning. What Canadians experience first, middle-class Americans experience next. The same pressures apply, only with a delay. Rising prices, layered fees, and declining value eventually reach a tipping point where emotional loyalty can no longer compensate for financial stress. The Canadian pullback is not an isolated international issue. It is a preview. It shows what happens when cost tolerance is exceeded, and it suggests that the retreat of Middle America is not a possibility, but a sequence already in motion. Trump's slump is not political, and it's economic anxiety. The term Trump slump is often framed as a political reaction, as if changes in travel behavior are driven by approval ratings, ideology, or partisan emotion, but this interpretation oversimplifies what Americans are actually responding to. The real driver is not politics, it is anxiety. Periods of political transition in the United States are always accompanied by economic uncertainty. Policy direction becomes unclear, inflation expectations rise, markets react emotionally, and inside households, a familiar instinct takes over: protect your money. This response is not ideological, it is psychological. When Americans feel uncertain about the future, spending behavior shifts quickly. Discretionary expenses are reevaluated. Large, non-essential purchases are delayed. Travel, in particular, becomes the first category to be reduced. Not eliminated, but restrained. Fewer trips, shorter stays, cheaper destinations, safer financial choices. Las Vegas is uniquely vulnerable to this pattern. The city depends on discretionary spending more than almost any other destination in the country. It thrives when confidence is high and disposable income feels secure. When anxiety spreads, Vegas becomes a pressure point. This has nothing to do with who occupies the White House. It has everything to do with how predictable the economy feels to ordinary Americans. Rising prices, shifting policies, and constant media noise combine into a sense that stability cannot be taken for granted. In that environment, risk avoidance becomes rational behavior. Vegas has historically been one of the first places to feel this shift. Long before recession headlines appear, visitation patterns begin to change. Not because people stop wanting entertainment, but because they stop trusting the timing. The trip can wait. The money feels safer at home. National anxiety does not need a recession to be damaging. It only needs uncertainty. And when uncertainty becomes the dominant emotion, cities built on confidence-driven spending feel the impact first. Vegas is not reacting to politics. It is reacting to fear. At first glance, the numbers appear contradictory. Casino revenues remain strong, while hospitality workers face layoffs, reduced hours, and shrinking job security. This is often framed as a temporary imbalance or a post-pandemic adjustment. In reality, it is neither. It is the result of a deliberate business model. Modern casino operations are designed to protect profit first. Automation has replaced many frontline roles. Digital check-ins reduce staffing needs. Self-service systems replace human interaction. At the same time, aggressive cost-cutting strategies minimize labor expenses while maintaining revenue streams. The result is fewer workers generating the same or higher profits. From a financial perspective, the model works. From a social perspective, it breaks an unspoken contract. Las Vegas was built on hospitality as labor. The city's identity depended on people, not systems. Service workers were not just employees, they were the interface between the city and its visitors. They created atmosphere, familiarity, and trust. As staffing shrinks, that experience changes. Hotels feel colder, service becomes transactional, interactions are efficient but impersonal. Visitors may not notice it immediately, but over time, the absence accumulates. The city begins to feel hollow. For workers, the consequences are immediate. Stable union jobs become temporary contracts. Full-time positions turn into part-time shifts. Economic security erodes in a city where many households depend entirely on tourism. This instability spreads outward, affecting neighborhoods, local businesses, and community cohesion. Vegas is no longer structured as a worker-friendly city. It prioritizes efficiency over employment and margins over livelihoods. While this may satisfy shareholders, it removes the human core that once defined the city. A place can remain profitable while losing its soul, and when that happens, the damage is not captured in quarterly reports. It appears slowly in the form of disengaged workers, detached visitors, and a city that feels less alive than it once did. The assumption that Las Vegas is losing visitors to other cities misses the real competition. Vegas is not primarily fighting Miami, Los Angeles, or New York. It is competing with something far more powerful and far less visible: staying home. By 2025, the economics of entertainment have fundamentally changed. Streaming services offer endless content at a fraction of the cost of travel. Home entertainment systems deliver experiences that once required leaving the house. Social media compresses excitement into short, consumable moments, reducing the urgency to seek it elsewhere. For many Americans, the emotional payoff of staying home has increased while the cost has dropped. This shift is especially pronounced among Gen X and Millennials. These generations are more financially cautious, more debt-aware, and more sensitive to stress. They do not measure experiences by scale alone. They measure them by how much disruption they cause to daily life. A weekend trip that introduces financial anxiety competes poorly against a quiet, controlled environment at home. Vegas struggles in this comparison. The city demands commitment. Travel costs are high. Fees are unpredictable. The psychological burden begins before the trip starts. Planning becomes stressful. The promise of escape is weakened by the fear of overspending. When leaving the house feels like a financial gamble, Americans do not look for alternative destinations. They opt out entirely. The couch, the television, and the comfort of predictability become rational choices. Peace of mind becomes a form of value. This is not a rejection of travel as a concept, it is a reassessment of risk. Entertainment that can be paused, controlled, and paid for in advance feels safer than experiences loaded with variables. Vegas, once synonymous with release and spontaneity, now carries the weight of uncertainty. In this environment, the city is not losing to better marketing or trendier locations. It is losing to convenience, affordability, and emotional safety, and that may be the most difficult competitor to overcome.